Last fall, amid plans by Amtrak to limit travel between Albany and New York City, the state got the ball rolling on filling the gap with Metro North train service, whose Hudson Line service has typically ended in Poughkeepsie. And while that option was supposed to go online this spring, it was put on the back burner after Amtrak agreed to restore some of its suspended train runs. But state lawmakers representing communities along the Hudson Line north of Poughkeepsie, as well as some from New York City, are still hoping for an expanded Metro North route. For more on this push, we're joined on the Capitol Press Room by Steve Strauss, Executive Director of Empire State Passengers Association, a passenger advocacy group. Thanks for making the time, Steve.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Well, let's start by talking about the status quo. If I want to travel from New York City to Albany or vice versa, what are my options for travel via train, including cost, availability, or maybe the experience on that train?
Sure. As of mid-March, you have 13 departures every day between Albany and New York City, and the prices are roughly $38 to $99. And that price variable largely depends on when you buy your ticket, what day of the week you want to ride, and how many other people want to ride at the same time you do. So Amtrak uses a system similar to the airlines. It's a demand-based dynamic pricing system.
And in terms of services, are there upgrades that people can get? Is it pretty much a no frills experience? I mean, for people who have never had the pleasure, what is the Amtrak line like?
Sure. I believe 6 of those trains each day have food and beverage service on them. The trains that continue on beyond Albany have food and beverage service. So there's 4 trains that go west from Albany every day, and there's 2 trains that go north from Albany every day, and they have food and beverage service. The Hudson Valley trains do not have food and beverage service, and that was a service reduction that went into effect about 20 years ago. And then some of the trains have a business class option, and some of the trains do not. Those are pretty nice in New York because it's a 2-1 seating instead of on the Northeast Corridor, the business class is 2-2 seating. On the Empire Corridor, it's 2-1 seating. So the seats are significantly bigger. It's a nice ride. And those often sell out.
And what about the reliability of the service? Because we often hear in New York City and with like the Long Island Railroad, there are issues with trains coming on time or coming when you expect them. Is that
Right.
something that's been a problem with Amtrak as well?
It varies a bit, but in general, the Hudson Valley trains are reasonably on time, particularly the trains that only travel between Albany and New York City. Amtrak has some padding in the schedule at Albany. The technical term is recovery time for trains headed to New York City. So they have that recovery time, which usually allows most trains to depart Albany southbound on time. But every once in a while, you'll get a train that's significantly late.
So we can get into the logistics of how this might actually happen, but what are the potential benefits then of having Metro North, which is part of the MTA, operate a train service with stops north of Poughkeepsie?
Sure. The real benefit would be providing additional seats. The biggest problem in the Hudson Valley right now is many days of the week, there are not enough seats to meet the demand. So Metro North service would add seats, taking the pressure off other trains, freeing up seats, allowing people to make last minute ticket buys if they wanted. Also, the price of the Metro North ticket would be at the bottom end of the Amtrak range. So we're looking at probably about $38 to go to Albany on Metro North. Of course, it's not quite as nice a ride. They have 3-2 seating and no food or beverage service on board. So there are a few trade-offs, but most people seem very excited about having that as an option. The other thing is we're pretty certain that Metro North tickets would be unreserved. Although that could actually lead to some overcrowding on Friday and Sunday trains.
Sure.
We'll have to see if that happens if the Metro North service materializes.
So what is it about a Metro North service that would allow it to be cheaper than Amtrak? Is it just that they don't use dynamic pricing and that they don't use the different options that people might be able to pay for, or some frills that might drive up the cost of a ticket?
So this is a little bit of an interesting secret. What most people don't know is because of a law that Congress passed in 2008, states are responsible for Amtrak service on routes that are 750 miles in length or shorter. So that means that all of the Amtrak service in New York State is paid for by New York State, except for one train, which is a long distance train, and that's the Lakeshore. The Lakeshore runs from Chicago to New York City every day. So New York State has a great deal of influence on fares. And if you look at other state supported trains around the country, you will see different pricing patterns. In New York, we've decided to have fairly high prices. And in part of the reason for that is the fact that we have the high demand and tight supply. In a couple of years, when there's going to be more seats available, new equipment coming in, it'll be an interesting question as to whether there's more flexibility in the fares. And fares are pretty cheap if you go beyond Albany or if you ride between Albany and points to the west or north.
Well, I want to talk about logistics of a potential expansion, but first, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. I'm David Lombardo, and this is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with Steve Strauss, Executive Director of the Empire State Passengers Association. So, for a plan like what the governor advanced last fall, going 80 miles north of Poughkeepsie, what would be needed to actually make this happen? And the things that come to my mind would be, do we have a railroad line for them to actually
Right,
follow? Do we have cars that are capable of it? Do we have personnel? I mean, what are some of the logistical
right.
challenges that would need to be overcome?
So Metro North definitely has the equipment, although I don't think their equipment is exactly designed to operate at low level platforms. So, as people who ride the Amtrak trains know, they have stairs at the doors that can flip from a high level platform level to serving a low level platform. I'm not sure that the Metro North, I don't think the Metro North equipment has that, but I'm not certain on that. I probably should know the answer to that question. But that can be dealt with stairs at the stations, with steps at the stations. But the equipment's there. Metro North has the diesel locomotives and the coaches. They run them on the upper Hudson line every day now. It would require some negotiation with Amtrak to get permission to operate between Poughkeepsie and Albany Rensselaer. CSX might also have to sign off because technically the track between Poughkeepsie and Albany Rensselaer is owned by CSX, although it is under a long-term lease to Amtrak as the operator and for all practical purposes, really the owner. Amtrak does the maintenance and runs that segment of the railroad. CSX does run a few freight trains there, mostly at night. So, and then the last thing is the Metro North crews would have to be, it's called trained on that segment of railroad. So they would have to learn the signals and the interlockings the same way they do on their existing service. So every Metro North engineer and conductor is trained to operate trains properly on the Hudson, Harlem, and New Haven lines. And there's a training process that they get familiar with the signals and the interlockings and the stations on segments of track. So that's a training process. It's done, everywhere in the railroad industry. There's set procedures for it, and that would also have to be done with the crews that we're going to operate north of Poughkeepsie. And then the Metro North trains would operate out of Grand Central. We think they would stop at 125th Street. We've encouraged that to add to the market potential for that service. And then probably run express up to Poughkeepsie, although some people have said it might not even stop at Poughkeepsie, and it might just run express from 125th Street to Rhinecliff as the first stop.
So I could imagine that if it's determined that this is not a moneymaker or even revenue neutral, that the state might not have an incentive to do something like this. But when the governor had contemplated expansion last year, she said that the Metro North expansion would be revenue neutral. Is that your understanding as well, or do you think this is something where the MTA could actually stand to make money and thus should explore it from that reason?
Right. Well, it's highly unlikely that the train would make money,
Okay.
but I think it could probably, break even if you were running just one train a day. Could probably break even. It would be a probably a 6 or 7 car train. As I mentioned, it has 3-2 seating. It can hold a lot of people, and even at $38 to go to Albany, or maybe a little less to go to Rhinecliff, it could generate a pretty fair amount of revenue. But again, we're just kind of like taking the word of the governor or her folks, and I suppose if it moved forward, people would want to see a little bit more information on that topic.
So we've got lawmakers and advocacy groups applying some soft pressure to rekindle conversations about this idea. Are there any more formative steps that you'd like to see policymakers in New York take? For example, if they were to advance legislation, could they force the MTA, for example, to engage in conversations with Amtrak? Or are there other formative or meaningful steps that the state could take to try to get this ball moving?
Well, I'm not sure if they could, pass a law. I guess they could pass the legislature could pass a law. If the governor didn't like it, she could veto it, trying to push the parties in that direction. Um, I think it's more a case of just a jawboning kind of thing of senior leadership in the legislature continuing to press on it, making it an issue. Maybe it becomes a campaign issue in the fall. That I don't know. Um, it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting issue for Amtrak because they're in this 18-month period where they have capacity restrictions due to the East River Tunnel repairs, and they also have a huge equipment shortage in the eastern U.S., um, which is going to start being rectified as the new Aero trains come into service. The first new Aero trains are going to go to the Pacific Northwest in 26 and most of 27, but hopefully by the midway through 2027, we may start seeing new Aero trains on the Northeast Corridor. That would allow Amtrak to take a few of these very old Amfleet coaches that run on the Northeast Corridor and in New York State, take a few of those cars, the ones that are still working reasonably well, and shift them up to New York for the time period until we get our new Aero trains, which is probably not going to be until 2030 or 2031.
Well, in addition to what you just mentioned about the new trains, you referred to the work on the East River tunnels. Is there reason to believe that when that work is done, that service is going to be as good or maybe better than it was before that work began? Or are we potentially looking at the status quo or still
Right.
problematic Amtrak service?
Well, it certainly should be better because it restores more capacity in the East River tunnels. It gives Amtrak and the Long Island Railroad some additional flexibility. I mean, what they're doing now is they're what we say turning trains on the platform in Penn Station. So trains from upstate New York that used to come to Penn Station and drop off passengers and then go out to Sunnyside Yard and be serviced out there, then come back in to Penn, pick up passengers, and go back up to upstate. They're now turning on the platform, which is a complicated move in the sense that they're taking very precious platform capacity time in Penn Station, and they're doing things in Penn Station like emptying trash cans and cleaning up bathrooms and aisles and all that on the platform in Penn Station before they take off to go north again. And Amtrak has shown they can do this. It's just a little trickier than taking the train out to Sunnyside. And it'll be interesting to see when the tunnels are finished. They may continue to turn some of the trains in on the platform in Penn Station, or they may take more of them back out to Sunnyside Yard in Queens. It remains to be seen.
Well, finally, given your expertise, I need your opinion on this hot topic. Do you prefer to look forward on the train? Do you like to look backward? or do you not have a strong position either way?
I would say I'm generally a forward-facing person whenever possible, but a couple of times that I've ridden backwards, it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it might be.
Well, we've been speaking with Steve Strauss. He's the executive director of the Empire State Passengers Association. Steve, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.